Metal Mike here, and this is the 100th episode of the 80's Glam Metalcast. Can you believe it? Because I frankly cannot. So, hey, in this one, we talk to a bass legend, Rudy Sarzo. We hear about his return to Quiet Riot, his time with Randy Rhoads and Ozzy, and we talk a little Whitesnake as well. Now stay tuned after the interview for the Glammy Awards. Yes, the votes are in, so stay tuned and see what former guests won awards. Check this out. So Rudy, welcome to the 80's Glam Metalcast. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, Mike. How you doing? God bless you, and thank you for having me on the show.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you here, man. You said you've been in a lot of bands that I've enjoyed over the years, so I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you today.
Okay.
Super exciting news, man. You're back home in Quiet Riot. How did this all come together?
Well, it's been in the works for a while. It was just a matter of, doing it not only with the right timing, but also, it was a move that not only that it had to be smooth transition, basically. Not only the transition of me coming over from the Guess Who back to Quiet Riot, but also a transition of for Chuck Wright, the bassist, who's been who's currently there, and so it had to be done as smooth as possible. I mean, of course, it's not going to be. We just have to try to do our best to make it a smooth transition, So that's what it took a while to do because, the timing had to be the right time and make sure that all the commitments were fulfilled from all ends according to agreements that we have. And so it's talking about, Frankie Banali is going to be a year on Friday that he passed away. But after he passed away, I got together with Regina. Actually, she made it possible for me to be by Frankie's side a few hours before he passed. She made it possible for me to come to the hospital. And, there were a lot of difficulties during that we experienced in COVID. So, here you have somebody who in 2019, Frankie, had me over at his house, give me the, revealed to me that he's been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And immediately he started treatments, doubled down on the treatments. He was getting the chemo, and then he was getting alternative treatments. And then he was also continuing to tour, and that takes a lot of energy. So he was focusing on that. And then a few months after that came COVID. And that made it really, really impossible for all us to get together. And meanwhile, he was still taking treatment and touring with the band. And I got to tell you, it became harder and harder to be able to, be in the presence of Frankie. It became impossible because there was no vaccine available yet. And even if there was, you have to be careful. So a year ago, still with no vaccine, and hospitals making it virtually impossible to visit due to COVID, Regina made it, made it happen that I was there with her and Frankie's daughter, actually, in the hospital room, hours before he passed. So shortly after he passed, I went to visit Regina, and she asked me to consider returning to Quiet Riot. And of course, it was not a decision that I was going to make immediately right there because, here we all are dealing with Frankie's recent passing. And we gave it a lot of thought, and basically here we are.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you got to spend some time with him before he passed, because at the end of the day, all band stuff aside, we're all people, and this is all, it's heavy stuff to go through. So I'm glad that you were able to, be with him at the end. Yeah,
it was a must for me to be there. Of course, there were so many elements that we had no control of. If Kaiser, the hospital said, listen, we're going through this COVID situation, and no, you can't come in. There was nothing I could do about it, but thank God that I was able to. And, next year marks 50 years of me having met Frankie, played with him 10 years, on and off, 10 years. before we actually recorded Mental Health in 1982, the album. And so Frankie was my entry, he was my mentor into rock and roll. You know, as I grew up in a Cuban culture, neighborhood, and all the musicians, you know, we love rock and we love to play rock, but it was not performed in a traditional Anglo British invasion influence kind of way. Yes, we were influenced, but yes, there was a lot of the Latin musical influences that we were not even aware of. This is how we spoke. This is how we play. And, you know, I have an accent, yes, because I'm Cuban, and this is what, you know, this is something that I have not worked on because I didn't want to work on. I didn't want to lose my accent, but I did want to play British invasion music properly, the way it was played. And Frankie was the first person that I met in South Florida because he was living in Fort Lauderdale and I was living in Miami. So he was the first one to actually play drums, like let's say John Bonham kind of, you know, style of playing. And there were no Cubans that I played with in Miami that played drums like that. And no, it was not part of our culture, you know. There are benefits on both sides, but I made a choice. I didn't want to be in Santana, even though I love Santana,
right.
But I wanted to be in Led Zeppelin, you know, right. In my mind. I wanted to be in Led Zeppelin, you know. And, so Frankie was the one who actually taught me how to be part of a rhythm section and the fundamentals of playing in that style. You know, so my whole journey actually began in the 50s. Towards a single consciousness. So here we have a consciousness of Frankie and myself, and my brother was there too. Robert, he was part of our group, and so then I actually started touring it in the Midwest in the mid '70s with Frankie. We were based out of Chicago, and in the mid '70s, and then we made our move to LA, and we made different trips and we kept running out of money. So we had to go back out there and tour again with different bands, you know, bar bands, and then come back to LA. And it was my last trip back to LA was in '78. That's when I joined Quiet Riot, you know, and again, finding a whole band that already was together in Los Angeles with the same consciousness as I had. That's what gave me the feeling of, okay, I'm going to put all my energies into this band. I'm not going to look outside of this band. These are the guys that I want to have a future with. And I'm talking 1978, the Randy Rhoads version of the band. And it's interesting that you know, you have the glam metal 80s moniker on the show, you know, and that consciousness, because that is exactly where we drew ours from. Now, ours was the 70s glam metal. Sure. And you would not have 80s glam metal without the origin of glam, which is in the 70s, you know.
Exactly.
And that's what Quiet Riot, that was our consciousness. That's what we were all about. Especially with the Randy Rhoads version. That's how we dressed on stage. You know, we had like little costumes and little outfits. And then, you know, we were as 70 glam metal as you could actually be without coming from England. You know, you were like a Los Angeles version of that, you know, because those are the bands that, not only the music, but the consciousness, the fellowship that we have. That's what we had in common. You know, and to me, every significant band is all about one thing. It's the music. You're together, playing together, not because of that you belong to a sport, you know, like say you follow the Dodgers. No. It's all about music, you know, or religion or politics. No, it's all about the music. At some point, that might get in the way and usually does. But at the very, very beginning, the reason why you're all playing in the same band is because you have one single mind, you know, one collective consciousness about it. And even after, let's say, Quiet Riot broke up in 1979 when Randy left to join Ozzy, and Kevin started a band called Dubrow, and a lot of the material that wound up on the album Metal Health was written during that Dubrow period, especially Thunderbird. Mm-hmm. And I used to play Thunderbird with Kevin in Dubrow and many of the other songs that wound up on Metal Health. So while I'm living with Kevin, I'm playing in Dubrow, and I get the call to audition for Ozzy, and I got the gig, you know. And what made it, and of course, so much of it had to do with the fact that Randy recommended me, mm-hmm. you know, mm-hmm. and he had gained, you know, Sharon's and Ozzy's trust. And that's how I got the gig. What made it so easy for me to fit in, not only easy to fit in, but actually easy to go from playing in a local band. I had never been on tour. I had never played in front of 10,000 people or more, not even close. I had never done that. But what made it so comfortable for me to be there was Randy. He goes, here I am again, a part of, I'm playing with Randy Rhoads, not only, you know, former bandmate in Quiet Riot and incredible musician, but somebody who even though he was playing Ozzy music, you know, music written basically to suit the image of a Black Sabbath singer going solo. There was so much Quiet Riot consciousness that surrounded him because that's all he knew, and he just knew how to be himself, which is what when Randy joined Ozzy, he asked Ozzy, what do you want me to write? And Ozzy said, just be yourself. And if you're listening to songs like Crazy Train, yeah, it has that dark drift, but once you get to the verse and all that, it's a major song. You know, it's a happy song. Yep. Very close to riffs that Randy used to write for Quiet Riot songs. You know, there's a lot of Quiet Riot essence in that. You listen to Goodbye to Romance. Well, that's pretty close to a song we used to do in Quiet Riot. It originally was called Teenage Anthem, and then it got actually reworked and recorded for the Condition Critical album. It got named The Winners Take All. You know, so there's a lot of the essence of Quiet Riot in early Ozzy. As a matter of fact, before I even joined the band, when they toured with Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake, you could see Randy wearing Quiet Riot clothing that he used to wear with us on stage during that tour, you know. And if you look at that picture, when I joined the band, it was basically Ozzy from Black Sabbath, Tommy Aldridge from Black Oak, and two guys from Quiet Riot. Yeah, you know. So, yes, there was an Ozzy consciousness being in the band because it's all about Ozzy and that certain image that was nurtured, carried over from Black Sabbath and taken to a whole different level once it became Ozzy Osbourne. But Randy made it feel very comfortable for me to be there. And having said that, I have to say the same thing about Sharon and Ozzy, but they had a whole different idea than Randy and I had, both coming from Quiet Riot and coming from the Sunset Strip, whereas Ozzy and Sharon were coming. Ozzy was coming from Black Sabbath, and Sharon was coming from that. You know, she worked for her father's management company and record company, so it was a very deep-rooted British rock scene that she was born into. You know, so it was a kind of like a blending of like British metal, British rock that was deeply rooted into, like, you know, Don Arden. He managed, and he had his label, and he worked with the Faces and Humble Pie, and yeah, definitely the Faces, early Faces. I'm not sure about Humble Pie though, but definitely the early Faces. And he had ELO at the time, Air Supply, so it was really rooted in that scene. And then you have a couple of guys from LA coming into it, you know, so that was a very interesting dynamic, especially at that time. Even though Sharon asked me to be Ozzy's drinking buddy, and I said, okay, why not? You know, and soon I learned that I could not keep up with Ozzy. So having said that, and so, you know, again, I got back on track. It only lasted like a few days. It only takes a few days to realize you can't keep up with this guy, you know. So I went back into like more of a civilized behavior on stage, you know. Oh no, not just on stage, but off stage. You know, I never drank on stage, but off stage, you know. And I'm going to say this because, you know, I've been asked this question a lot about Randy Rhoads. Especially now he's been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you know, and I've been asked the question about Randy influence, and so I have to like really study it so I could give an educated answer from my perception of being there and looking at what was going on and what actually happened as far as his musical influence. And if you look back late 70s, the last shredder, Guitar Hero, whose band got signed was Van Halen. And immediately after Van Halen came in, so did punk and new wave. So there was not a continuation of, okay, you have Eddie Van Halen, and then these musicians were influenced by him, and there you got these other bands. No, it just, they shut the doors of record labels, shut the doors on bands getting signed in Los Angeles. You know, so it took Randy to leave LA, go to England, you know, record with Ozzy, and then come back to the United States with Ozzy to restart what had ended with Eddie Van Halen. So having said that, I mean, Randy just came in, you know, from England with that batch of songs, great record, incredible record, landmark record, you know, and Ozzy and just basically he was himself every night on that stage, you know. And if you take a look at a photo of Randy with early Quiet Riot, and you take a look at Randy with Ozzy, it's exactly the same energy, the same passion.
I wanted to ask you about Whitesnake because I got into music in the mid-'80s, and actually Whitesnake Motley Crue was the first concert I ever went to, and that you were playing at that one. What was that like getting into Whitesnake? Because you didn't play on that album, but then this band gets constructed, you know, to go out on tour and to do the videos. Was that awkward, or were you fine with it? What are your thoughts on getting into the band in '87?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, my roots with Whitesnake, they date back to 1984, the Condition Critical Quiet Riot tour, when Whitesnake was the opening band. So I met everybody. I became very close with all the members, and I have been a fan of Whitesnake, you know, since the '70s. So it was wonderful, and you know, and David, you know, with Deep Purple, you know, so one of my favorite records of all time, Burn, you know.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, I'll never forget going to Frankie Banali's home, and he used to work at a record store. Frankie did. And so he had a massive collection of albums. And he's the one who turned me on to the Burn album. And, you know, listening to those songs for the very first time in his bedroom at his parents' house. And so when I left Quiet Riot in 1985, I got a call from management, and at the time I was putting the band together with Tommy Aldridge, and we went over to Whitesnake's management office, and they offered us to join the band. And what happened is this: since I had toured with Whitesnake, I knew about the inner conflicts that were going on within the band. So I was not surprised that there was going to be a new band shortly. Sure. Because you know, there was so much conflict going on. I could not see that, you know, surviving. But then when they brought us in, there was one musician left in the band that was part of that conflict, and I decided, I said, no, I'm just leaving one situation. I don't want to join another situation. Right. So I passed on the opportunity in 1985, and I really believe that if I would have said yes, I would have never made it through past the recording of the record, because nobody from that record survived. No. Went on to, you know, to the 1987 tour. Adrian had joined Whitesnake right before they finished the record. So the 87 record. So he got to play the solo on Here I Go Again. But there's no other musician besides, of course, David Coverdale, who made it from that record to the tour, 1987.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of Slip of the Tongue? I love that album. I think I thought you and the rest of the guys brought a real heavy groove to that album. And I love Steve Vai and Whitesnake. What do you think of it?
You know, that's an interesting record because there was a certain vision for that record that by the time it was recorded, Adrian Vandenberg was not able to lay down his guitar tracks because he was injured during the production of the album. And then Steve Vai was brought in, and he brought in a beautiful vision because he was very aware of being able to fit into what the music that had been created or written, especially the guitar parts, but then he brought in his own flavor to it. So it's kind of like a beautiful blend of the Whitesnake consciousness, and I mean everything dating back to the first album, and just usually a natural growth from one record to the other. And this definitely, it was going to be a growth even without Steve, but Steve made it a growth and almost a quantum leap into the future of what was considered, because if you listen to the record now, it's very contemporary.
Yeah.
You know, whereas 30 years ago when it first came out, it was ahead of its time.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one guy that you've done some work with that I'm a really big fan of is Mike Visera. I thought you've done some interesting stuff with him, especially Animetal USA. Talk about Mike a little bit. Do you like doing work with him?
Oh, I love working with Mike. He's a consummate professional. You know, he's an incredible singer. He's got his own sound. Great to be on the road with and to be on stage. I mean, he's got great work ethics. By that I mean that we have actually in Animetal USA we have flown from LA to Japan. We arrived in Japan, in Tokyo, around 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. And straight from the airport, we will go down to television station and start doing promo. And Mike had previously spent time in Japan while he was a member of Loudness. So he speaks some Japanese. And so he will be like doing the interviews and then just get up there and sing live, because see, it's a TV show, so we actually get to sync to our own parts that we recorded, but Mike had to sing live.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, we knew how tough that was, but he always made it happen, and it was fantastic. Consummate professional, great guy to hang around with. I love Mike, and I love working with him. Yeah.
Probably like you probably do the same thing when you get ready to interview somebody. I know you do your radio show. You do some research, and I figured I was into music through a lot of your career, so I've known a lot of the things you've done. So I'm reading some stuff, and I'm like, Rudy was in Angel for a brief period, and I never knew that. I love the band Angel. Obviously, I wasn't there for their time, but I discovered them after. I'm a big Kiss fan, so I discovered Angel kind of after the fact. But I didn't know that. Was it all the original guys plus you at that point? I know Frank was out of the band at a certain point, but who did you play with in Angel?
Yeah, it was all the guys. I would have been because if I would have originally I was in Angel where I was living in Kevin DuBro's apartment and playing in DuBro. So I was doing multiple things. And, but we never play live. We just, in Angel, we just, went in the studio a lot to make demos because they were in between labels.
Okay.
And they were pretty close to getting signed, but by the time that I got the phone call from to audition for Ozzy, there was no record deal solidified. Not even close. It was just like that making demo process. But I loved the band, and so when she called me the first time, I turned it down. It wasn't until the following day, after meditating on it and having Kevin yell at me for turning down the opportunity to audition for Ozzy, and especially to play with Randy again, which when I was asked to audition, I didn't even consider that. It was just kind of like more leaning towards, I really don't want to leave Angel, type of thought. So it was hard because I really liked the guys and I loved everything about Angel, but then again, I was sleeping on the floor and barely having any money to eat. There was really no money to eat. All the money that I was making was playing gigs with Dubrow, and that mostly went to pay my rent at Kevin's apartment.
So you had to do what was financially smart. Makes sense.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm the type of musician that, especially when I did not have any responsibilities before I was married or was with anybody that I had to devote my life to, like my wife for 37 years. All the decisions were made basically on a musical basis. It was not about the money. Mm-hmm. It was about the music, the quality of the music and the quality of the musicians that I was going to play with, or the people, or having made a commitment. It was tough, very tough, having to call the guys. I believe I called Frank Domino because I think he was kind of like running the business at the time. He was like the most focused in the business end of Angel. So I called him to let him know that I had, joined Ozzy, and it was not easy. Not easy at all. It never is.
Sure.
Never is. I find myself even recently telling the guys in the Guess Who that I had, that I was going back to Quiet Riot, and they understood, especially the founding member Gary Peterson, our drummer, because he's the only founding member left in the Guess Who. I took over the other founding member, Jim Cale, in the band. I've been there for 5 years, so he understands what my decision is based on, and my commitment, and it's like he knows. I've had this conversation with him. Where any band that I do outside of Quiet Riot, which is it's my consciousness. This is what I believe in, what we did in that band, whether it was with Randy and then it got carried over to the Mental Health version. That's me. That's me. If you see me on stage, that's me. Nobody telling me to be that guy or not to be that guy, but then there is, let's say when following Quiet Riot, I went into Whitesnake, and I asked David, and of course, like I mentioned before, David had been watching me just about every night on tour because we toured together. So he knew what I was all about on stage, my performance, and I asked him, what do you want me to do performance-wise? Because that was a whole different Whitesnake from that, from the 80s, with the 87 touring band. That also was mostly without difference between Vivian not being there and then Steve Vai, but it was still the rest of us for the Slip of the Tongue tour. It was a whole different attitude on stage that we had in comparison to the previous band or previous incarnations of Whitesnake. This was a band from the 87 touring band on to the Slip of the Tongue. That was pretty much an MTV American consciousness, yes. The way we did things, the way that the image, we had I just did a show with Fleur Steinmeier, who was our designer. She was so many things. For the first video that I did with Whitesnake, Slip of the Tongue, she came to my house, she went through my closet, she picked clothing, and she said, bring this to the video shoot tomorrow. Okay, she had done that with every guy. She had gone to their place and looked through the closet and brought that. Okay, so in that video, it's clothes that we had. And she gave us a kind of like a cohesive look, image. By the time that we did Here I Go Again and Is This Love, which were actually done back to back, now we're a band. See, because we were not a band officially on the Slip of the Tongue video. Yeah. We had just met right there at the video shoot, and we did this. Now we're a band for Here I Go Again. And that's more of, okay, now we're going to make you guys clothing. So she designed certain looks for each one of us. And from then on, and now it became like, okay, this is the Whitesnake look. you know. And a lot of it had to do with ideas that what he brought in, but it was mostly, I would say 90% of it was Flair's vision. Mm-hmm. She's a pro. She worked with the best. She made the best look great. So I always leave it up to her anytime that we get to work. It's like, hey, do your thing. I trust you.
Do you still have contact with Carlos Cavazo? I mean, do you ever think you'll ever play with him again, or what's the relationship?
You know, my contact with Carlos has always been when we bump into each other. You know, we give each other a hug and how are you doing, and then we just carry on with life. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Rudy, it's been great talking with you, man. I can tell that, you know, Quiet Riot is in your blood. I know we talk about all these different bands, but you're always going to be Rudy Sarzo from Quiet Riot. So it's great news that you're back. Anything you want to say in closing, my friend?
I can't wait for Rudy Sarzo from Quiet Riot to go back out there with the guys again, you know, with Quiet Riot. You know, it's going to be a celebration of a legacy that, for me personally, dates back 50 years. Next year is the 40th anniversary of the recording of the Mental Health album, because it was released in '83, but it was recorded in '82, mm-hmm. and it had its own journey to even become Quiet Riot again. You know, because it did not become Quiet Riot officially until we signed the record deal with Pasha Columbia Records. And then we did our first show as Quiet Riot in March of 1983, the weekend of the Tuesday when the album was dropped. We never used to call it drop, because if you drop a vinyl, it would break. So it was the album release. They used to release on Tuesdays. And that weekend we did 4 shows in 2 nights at the Roxy in Los Angeles. So that was the return of Quiet Riot in '83, because every other show, once Randy left, it stopped being Quiet Riot, then it became Dubrow, and then it became Quiet Riot again once the album was released, Mental Health, and we played at the Roxy. Yeah. So I just can't wait to go back out there with, you know, this time with Jizzy, Pearl, and Johnny Kelly, and Alex Grossi, you know, go back out there and celebrate the legacy of Quiet Riot, you know, celebrate Kevin, Frankie, Randy. Every time I play Thunderbird, I know what that song is about, mm-hmm. you know, and that's a song that brought me back into the band for the Mental Health version of the band. And, you know, it's a celebration of their memory and all their contributions, you know, and the single consciousness that Quiet Riot is all about, which is about feeling the noise and banging your head.
That's a great way to end it, my friend. Thanks so much for your time. You have a great day.
You too, Mike. God bless you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
God bless. Well, here we are to commemorate the 100th episode of the 80s Glam Metalcast. It's the Glammys. Yes, we did a Twitter poll with lots of questions for you guys. You voted, and we'll reveal all the winners here tonight. So first up, the first award is for Best Accent. Yes, that's right. Over the past almost 2 years, we've talked to people all over the world. People in Australia, the UK, Sweden, you name it. So many cool accents, and it really just made me jealous, because I just have a regular American accent. I like these foreign accents. They sound cool. You voted for the best accent of anybody that was ever on the 80s Glam Metalcast, and the Glammy goes to Ronnie Laticro from TNT. Yeah, all right. Now, Ronnie, can you give us some words of wisdom in that super cool accent of yours?
Hard rock and heavy metal is the only solution for world peace, because music is the instrument for world harmony.
That was freaking beautiful. So next up is the best hair of the 80s. So who was on that had the best hair in the 80s? Now, there was some cool hairdos, man. If you go through and scroll through the channel, you'll see what I'm talking about. But there is a winner, and you guys voted for Mark Torian from the Bullet Boys. Now, Mark wasn't able to join us, but I did get a memo back from his management saying, that's hilarious. Well, I'm not laughing, because on the 80s Glam Metalcast, we take hair very seriously. So now we're moving on to who your favorite drummer is that's been interviewed on the 80s Glam Metalcast. And you know, there was lots of cool drummers that came on, but the Glammy goes to Vinny Appice. Yes. Now, Vinny couldn't join us, but I'm sure that he holds this honor in the highest of regards. Next up is bass. Who did you guys vote for that was your favorite bass player that's been on the 80s Glam Metalcast? Let's check this out. The Glammy goes to Kelly Nichols. Kelly, congrats. Anything you want to say, my friend?
Yeah, thanks. It's all about the bass player.
Very, very nice. Wow, now this is a tough one. We put it out there. Who is your favorite guitarist that's ever been on the 80s Glam Metalcast? And you know what? There have been so many killer 80s shredders. Just so many to choose from. But one was chosen by you guys. The Glammy goes to Bruce Kulick. Now, Bruce, anything you want to say about this prestigious award?
It's totally mind-boggling, you know. So it's a good thing.
I totally agree with you. Vocals, wow. Tons and tons and tons of cool vocalists. But the Glammy can only go to one person, and it goes to Stephen Percy of Rat. Now, Stephen, what do you think of all this?
I embrace it. You know, I'll embrace it. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, hey, man, it matters to us. We appreciate you coming on the show. So we had a lot of themed episodes with lots of different special guests. We've had Kiss themed, we've had Poison themed, we've had Crew. All kinds of cool people have been on. People like Chuck Schuh and Pastor Wildman and Steve from the Wildman and Steve show. So many cool people have joined us from other shows. Glam metal authors have been on, like Christopher Hilton, Paul Miles. But only one could win, and the Glammy goes to the Kistorian, Bob Nash. Now, Bob couldn't join us. He's out rubbing elbows with big-timers like Eddie Trunk and the guys from Three Sides of the Coin, but I'm sure he's appreciating this award. I'm just kidding. I'm sure Bob will be on again, and we'll do some more Kiss conversations. Now, last but not least, it's going to be for your favorite episode 1 through 99. It's the one that has the most views. Multiple stories came out of this. It was published in lots of different websites multiple times. The Glammy goes to Joe Lynn Turner. So what do you think of this, Joe?
And the people that have supported and loved me all these years, I would be nowhere without them. And that's something that I fully understand, realize, and am blessed for. So I just want to say to everybody out there who has, I love you, I bless you, and I'm thankful eternally for all of that. And that goes for you too, buddy.
Well, thank you, my friend. In all seriousness, everybody, thanks for joining me on this glam metal journey. You can check out all the episodes that we talked about on the channel, and there's a lot more on the way. There's only one way to close this 100th episode out, is by saying, rock on!